everybody on the team came to the team with zero experience unless you were from overseas.
Today on the show, I have former Memphis State rugby player and the current head coach of the University of Memphis rugby team. Coach Dave Hill is up next. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Fifth Quarter Podcast. I'm your host, Sandy Adams, and this is where we dive deep into the stories of retired athletes, their perseverance, their resilience, their career pivots, and finding the passion they crave. So grab your iced tea because I'm from the South. Get ready to be motivated and inspired because this is where the real stories are told. Today's guest hails from Garland, Texas, a retired rugby player who played collegiately at the University of Texas Arlington and Memphis State University, a retired commander in the United States Navy, and a former player for numerous rugby teams around the world at his various duty stations. While stationed here at Millington, he spent 11 years as the high school girls and boys coach for the Brighton Rugby Club, later called Storm Rugby. His high school teams won 18 conference championships and 2 state titles. And in 2014, he founded the first U.S. girls middle school tackle rugby team. In addition to coaching overseas, he's the former coach of Memphis Intercity Rugby and now sits on their board of directors. But today, he's the head coach for the University of Memphis rugby team and the 2023 Division II Coach of the Year. Under his leadership, the Memphis Tigers have won 3 consecutive D2 conference championships, 3 impressive seasons for the Sevens team, going to the national championship twice. The Memphis Tigers are currently ranked nationally at number 2 in the 15s and number 4 in the 7s. Welcome to the show, Coach Dave Hill.
Hi, Sandy. Thanks for having me. I'm always,
Hi.
hi. I'm always happy to talk about rugby.
Well, and I'm so thankful for that. I want to start off with telling everybody how we kind of know each other. Or I think it was like 2 weeks ago, I was on a Facebook and someone had shared a post about the rugby team and specifically about you. And normally I probably wouldn't have spent much time, but I caught where it said that you had graduated from Memphis and you had been in the Navy. And I looked to see the years and I was like, he was there when I was there. So I read the article and I sent it to my friend Steve Cooper, who was supposed to guest host with me today, but he is having issues with his internet in Italy. So I sent it to him and I was like, hey, Steve, do you know this guy? He's like, I sure do. And I said, hey, ask him if he wants to be on my podcast. That's kind of like my lead in now to everybody. But he put us in touch with each other, and I'm very excited to dive into your story, not only about rugby, but also about the military. Because I've found and I've talked to so many people that, playing sports is passionate, and a lot of times the elite athletes, they go all in on their sport and they don't necessarily look for a plan B. When you started playing rugby, and we'll get into the whys and the hows and all of that, you already had when you were at Memphis, you already had a plan A, which was the military, going into the Navy. And then throughout the remainder of your naval career, you did play rugby. And then when you retired, you came back to Memphis and joined the staff on Memphis Intercity Rugby and then later the University of Memphis. So I find it a fascinating tale of 2 passions that kind of intersected each other in kind of it's kind of like passing the baton at different points in your life to each one of those. But let's dive into, what convinced you in 2001 to start your 5th quarter with rugby and stop playing the sport?
Well, in 2001, I was 35. Had a small baby at home, and and I was just honestly just pretty beat up. It's a as you know a rough sport and takes a big toll on your body. And most guys retire in their 30s if they make it that
Oh,
long, if they really want to keep playing. But once you get to that age, you just get too slow, and it's too hard to get out of bed in the morning after a game, and you start to look for something else to do.
so you got into coaching after that, after you retired from being a player. Was coaching a natural progression for you? Was that something that you had thought about doing, was coaching?
I hadn't thought about it before then. In 2004, we moved to, I got stationed in Millington, which is near Memphis for your
Mhm.
listeners. And I was just in the gym one day on the base, and I saw a flyer for a local high school team that was looking for
Right.
players. And so I grabbed the flyer. I called the guy up, the coach, and said, "Hey, I played rugby, 15 years, and I've just got stationed here. And do you need any help coaching?" And he said, "Sure." And that's where it started.
Wow, that one phone call, that one flyer. So let's go back to the beginning. I said that you're from Garland, Texas. Did you grow up the whole time in Garland, Texas?
I was born in Southern Indiana, and my
Okay.
family moved to Garland when I was in the fourth grade.
Okay.
So yeah, mostly just grew up in Garland.
And when did you start playing rugby?
I started playing right after high school. I went to the University of Texas at Arlington, and they had a team.
So you
And
had oh, wait a minute. So you had never played rugby before you got to UT Arlington?
no, there at that time there was no high school rugby in America at all. High school rugby in America didn't start until around 2000.
Right.
Everybody on the team came to the team with zero experience unless you were from overseas, which there
So
weren't any.
so what made you join the rugby team when you got to UT Arlington?
Well, I was on campus. I was a freshman, and they had their club and intramural day where everyone sets up
Right.
tables and tries to get people to join their clubs. And I had I loved playing football, but I was too small for football. And I'm just walking by, and I saw the table and started talking to the guys, and I'm like, yeah, I'll give that a try. And I went out there and just loved it. Just absolutely loved it.
So I saw that you played soccer in high school.
Hmm.
What was the difference for you? Did you love playing soccer?
I really enjoyed playing soccer, but I wasn't very good. Uh, I was on the varsity, but I spent most of that time on the bench. Uh,
Right.
you know, but it was a sport I could play and was good enough to be on the team. But and then like I said, at that time, I was too small to play football
Right.
and too slow to be any better at soccer. And so I was kind of this in between athlete between soccer and football, and I couldn't really do either one. And then when I found rugby, it was perfect fit for me.
So how was it a perfect fit? Because I mean, I've seen rugby played, but I don't really understand the mechanics of how could you excel at rugby? Is that so can you just speak to that of how you
Um, well, rugby, it's very physical. Uh,
Mhm.
and I've always liked that as a kid growing up. I was a very rough and tumble kid,
Right.
and I just loved the contact. Backyard football, was probably my favorite thing to do in the world. And
Right.
so it just fit my mentality, of the game of wanting and desiring contact, the physical part of the game.
Sure.
And so that's really what drew me to it.
Is that something that you miss today? Was it hard to give up that physical aspect of playing the game?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a huge adrenaline rush to be
Mhm.
in that situation. And even now at 60 years old in practice, I'll get out and practice and tackle some guys, showing them drills and things. And it just makes you feel good. It makes you feel alive and, you know, get you pumped up. And so I still love it. I just can't do it very much.
So did you find because we had a gentleman, he played football. We had a gentleman on several weeks ago and he talked about, when he stopped playing football, what he found missing was he missed the camaraderie with the team. He missed that adrenaline rush, but he also missed, he's like, I'm not a violent person, he said, but you get to go out there and hit people every week. And he goes, it gives you, you
Yeah.
release a lot of your stress or whatever. And he's like, suddenly I don't have the ability to do that, and I had to find something else to expel that energy. Did you have
Mhm.
that same
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what I'm talking about. You have
Yeah.
this pent up energy and you need an outlet for it. And for me, that was always sports. And I
Mhm.
played a lot of different sports and was, okay or pretty good at most of them, but rugby is the one that just seemed to fit me
Right.
best.
So did you find something to take the place of that physicality?
After I quit playing, not
Yes.
really. You know, I go to the gym and do that kind of stuff, but nothing's the same as physical. just
Right.
tackling and hitting and those things. And I really miss it. I absolutely do.
So, let's talk about that. I think the time that you spent at UT Arlington. So you found this sport that you loved, and how did you get from there to the Navy? Because you enlisted in the Navy
Mhm.
right after UT Arlington.
Yeah, I went to UT Arlington and I had an academic scholarship.
Hmm.
And when I got there, I tell this story this way now. When I got there, I triple majored in
Oh,
beer, rugby, and girls,
which I think a lot of people do.
right? And so my GPA was awful. I lost my scholarship, and but a lot of members of my family had been in the Navy, and I was like,
Hmm.
well, what am I going to do, with myself? So I enlisted in the Navy, and I spent a couple of years enlisted. Uh, and while I was enlisted, I was here in Millington at
Right.
A school,
Hmm.
and I applied for ROTC. Well, when you apply for ROTC, I guess they somehow got my name on a list at Memphis because I'm in their area, and I
Sure.
got an application from Memphis State.
Right.
While I was in the process, it takes about a year, and I'm like, well, okay, they sent me an application, I'll fill it out, but I really wanted to go to Notre Dame was my dream school.
Right.
So I finished my schooling at A school in Millington and get to my squadron in Whidbey Island, Washington. And Memphis accepted me pretty quickly, and I was waiting to hear from the other schools. And this was the same time that Gaddafi was making all that trouble
Yes.
in the Med, and I was assigned to an air squadron that was assigned to a carrier, and the carrier's deployment got moved up because of
Right.
that. And so the CO called me in. He said, "We're leaving in 3 weeks. What are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, I guess I'm a tiger." And so I came to Memphis, and my plan was, well, I'll go to Memphis for a year and then I'll transfer, because
Right.
I did, I had later gotten accepted to Notre Dame, but then I got to Memphis and I just loved it. I loved the team. I loved the school. I had a girlfriend, all those things. And I said, well, I'm just going to stay in Memphis. So I stayed.
Were your grades better at Memphis?
Yes. Yeah, a couple years in the Navy had taught me time management and discipline and
Sure.
focus and the things that when the first time I went to school, I just didn't have those skills.
Well,
Um,
and that's something that a lot of my guests have talked about is, they don't necessarily teach that in high school.
right.
And you go from a parental controlled family to then you have nobody being a parent and
Absolutely
and
true.
and you're free and it's really hard and if you add sports into that, you're having to play different roles and you're not exactly equipped for that. And I think, your story is the story of so many kids out there. Uh,
Yeah, I see it all the time in my
yeah,
players. They can't make it through the first year, and it's
yeah,
not because they're not capable of it as academically, but they just don't
yeah.
have the skill set that they need to
So
succeed.
I learned early on not to take 8 a.m. classes. I learned that very quickly. So you're at Memphis, you're loving it, you decide to stay, and you're playing rugby. What was that? Because a lot of the Navy guys, a lot of the ROTC guys were there playing rugby. I remember the majority of them being Navy guys.
Mhm.
What was so kind of take us through that spurt of you as a rugby player and the Memphis State rugby team at that time.
Okay, so they had a team for a year before, and they had a coach, and I had played before, so I called up the coach before I even got there and said, "Hey, I'm coming. This is a position I play. I want to play on the team." Da 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 da. So I get there, and I'm in the ROTC unit, and I'm playing rugby, and I just start recruiting players from ROTC from Navy
Right.
ROTC, and
Right.
we end up with like half the team is
Yes.
Navy ROTC guys. Because started recruiting them and they started recruiting, more and more of them. And we
Right.
just kind of, you know, brought all those guys onto the team in those years.
It was funny when we had that phone call to talk about the show and you being on it. I have, and you're like, I don't think I have any pictures from that time period. And I was like, I have pictures from that time
Oh,
period.
wow.
So I've got to go and look because I went out and photographed one of the games. It was really muddy, but I've got to go back through some
Oh, wow.
boxes. I've got to go back through some boxes and get those pictures out because I definitely have. Don't know if you're in them, but
Okay.
I definitely have some pictures, and it was probably my junior year, which would have been probably 88, 89, 89,
Okay. Yeah, I
probably.
was definitely there.
Yeah.
Were you dating someone on the team?
No.
No.
A really good friend of mine, John Bernard, he was
Yeah,
also,
I know
yes.
John.
So the Navy ROTC wanted to start a support group called the Mariners, like the Air Force had. I forgot what the Air Force support group is called. They
Okay.
wanted to start a support group for the Navy ROTC. So he reached out to me and was like, "Hey, can you help me start this?" And so I was, I think, the first president of the Mariners.
Okay.
And for me, my major was international relations, so most of my classes were political science, and
Mhm.
a lot of the Navy guys, especially those coming back to be officers, were they were in my political science classes because that was
Okay.
a common degree for them. So I not only knew those, but so Major Glenn White, he was over the OTC program or a
Mhm.
part of that at some time. So yeah, so I mean that's kind of how I was in the mix over there. And so,
Okay.
but yeah, that's it.
Okay.
um, okay. So y'all learned a little bit extra about me today.
There we go.
So we talked about that. So you graduate, you get commissioned as an officer in the United
Mhm.
States Navy. And where are you deployed to next? Like, where's your first?
So first I go to San Diego for 6 months for Surface Warfare Officer School.
Yes.
So that's my initial training. But my first duty assignment is on the USS Arkansas out of San Francisco,
Okay.
technically Alameda, but the San Francisco
Right.
area. So I go to San Diego for 6 months, play a little bit there with some local men's clubs, but I know I'm only there for 6 months,
Right.
and then got up to San Francisco.
So did you reach out to those teams just because that was something you wanted to do in your spare time and you wanted to keep
Yeah,
playing?
yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, I
And
just
we
just wanted to keep playing, and it was like I said earlier, it was kind of the wild, wild west of
right.
sports rugby then. And so you just show up and they're like, hey, you know how to play? Yeah, okay, let's go. And
And it
you're like,
is very physical. You don't have like you just have like a t-shirt and shorts on,
yeah,
right? You
yeah.
don't have any
Don't
pads
have
or
a bunch of
anything.
gear you got to carry around. You just need a pair
Yeah.
of cleats and a mouthpiece.
Yes. So when you went into the Navy, what was your job? Like what was the path that you were taking in the Navy?
So initially, I was a surface warfare officer, so I drove
Okay.
ships. I was on
Okay.
ships, running ships as an officer, and I did that for 2 tours, and then I switched to human resources
Mhm.
field, and so then I spent the rest of my career doing HR stuff.
Okay. Why did you want to switch?
Um, I'd done 2 tours at sea, of sea duty, and it's a lot of
Mhm.
time away. It's a lot of sea,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And I was just ready to settle down a little more and be at home and that kind of.
What was the longest you were on one of the ships?
So I was on the Arkansas for 3.5 years.
Mhm.
And of that, I did 2 6-month deployments to the Western Pacific.
Right.
Uh, and typically, when you're assigned on a ship, you're away from home about half of the time
Mhm.
in general. So I did 3.5 years there, and then I got stationed in San Diego on a coastal patrol craft, the USS Hurricane, and I was on the Hurricane for 3 years. And the same thing, deploying
Right.
at sea a lot,
Right.
that kind of thing.
It's would you were you already married then?
No, when I got to San Diego and I was on the Hurricane, that's where I met my first wife. I'm on my
Okay.
second marriage now.
We had the same so your interview will air after the one with the handball players, and we had the same thing with that with him. Um so where were the other like so you spent how many years in the Navy?
A total of 26 on active duty.
And
Uh,
where were like some of the biggest, like some of the ports of call or some of the places you were stationed?
So when I was enlisted,
Hmm.
before all this, I was stationed in Whidbey Island, Washington, in an
Right.
air squadron. And so then I was in San Francisco, then San Diego. I was in Panama for a while, waiting for my next duty station. Um, then I was in Greece. I
Hmm.
was in Boston. I was in Germany, and then I was in Memphis. For the
Okay.
last 10 years, I was in Memphis, the Memphis area.
So that was a pretty nice one to be in Memphis so long. And we're going to get going and get into that. So you were in Memphis and you saw a flyer for a high school team.
Right.
And that's when your coaching career kind of started, right?
Yeah, yeah, I had stopped playing, and I was just in the gym one day, right after I had gotten stationed in Millington, and there was a flyer there recruiting kids to
Right.
play on the high school team. And I saw it and picked it up, and I called the coach and said, "Hey, I'm just got assigned here, and do you need some help coaching?" And he said, "Absolutely." And so I went out, and that started 12 years of coaching high school.
So I was pretty impressed that you had a girls team as well, that girls would want to play that type of sport. Because
Hmm.
but then I looked, so you had started the first girls tackle. So before that, were the girls tackling like the boys do in rugby?
Yeah, that high school team, we had a boys high school and a girls high school team, and they were both tackle, and tackle
Okay.
rugby was taking off in the US for
Right.
both boys and girls. And so what we found is, the way to get better is to have kids that come in as freshmen that have already played.
Sure.
So we had started a boys middle school team, and that was very successful for our boys program. So then
Right.
I'm like, well, let's start a girls team, even though they don't have anybody to play against. They just played themselves,
Sure.
but we would set up it. It was like a game. It would be at the field,
Right.
whole
Right.
thing, two teams, and just playing against each other, so that they could learn the game. And then when they came to the high school team as freshmen, they had already learned how to tackle, and they'd already learned the
Right.
basics of the rules and all those things. And so that helped our high school team be more successful.
Did you find, did you have trouble getting girls to want to play rugby? Was it
Oh no,
hard to start that?
no, no,
Really?
no.
Did you have problems with parents though, with moms?
Some of them I would have parents meeting at the beginning of the season, and I always would tell them, if your child plays rugby, they will get hurt.
This,
It's
this
you
is
don't see a
true.
lot of serious injuries, but I promise they're going to
Right.
come home bloodied and beaten and bruised. And but the girls, there was no contact sport for girls. The
Right.
closest to contact sport for girls was basketball,
Sure.
which, yeah, there is some contact, but it's not the same thing.
No, it's
So
not.
there's this whole group of girls who want that, who had no outlet for it. And so those girls, they clamored to be on the team. And there were other girls who would never get near it in a million years, right?
Right.
Different kind of person. But that group of girls, there were always plenty to
Right.
fill out the team, that they really wanted the physicalness of the game.
Are those programs still doing really well in Tipton County?
Well, unfortunately not. The other coach took a job at Christian Brothers High School, where he coaches rugby still,
Okay.
and we passed the boys' side on to some other coaches. And then when I moved to Costa Rica in 2016, I passed the girls' team on to my assistant coach, who had played for me.
Right.
And a year later, she got a scholarship to go play at Life University, which is one of the biggest rugby programs in the country. And so she left, and she turned it over to another young lady who had played for me. But it just,
Yeah.
both the teams couldn't survive Dr. Whitmer and I leaving. And so when he went to Christian Brothers and I went to Costa Rica, it just dwindled and failed, and they don't have a team up there now.
It was interesting. In the previous interview, I interviewed two of the handball players from Memphis State, and back in the late '80s, early '90s, we had the best team in the nation
Yeah, I
for multiple
remember.
years, and we were talking about the downfall of the Memphis handball team. So when Charlie Mazzoni left, when he retired, there wasn't really anyone to take it over, and so we don't have a handball team at Memphis.
Right.
And we don't have a racquetball team either. And, we were talking about how the schools that have those, and so for me, I look at it as rugby and handball are kind of, it's based on that passion. and they started out. Is rugby at Memphis now still considered a club sport?
Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
club sport across the
yeah,
US. Now, some schools give more support than others.
right.
It's not an NCAA sport, and I don't really think it ever will be
No.
because for a lot of reasons that if you want to talk about, we can, but
Okay.
it's a club sport. And so, the university gives us a place to practice and they give us the same thing they give every club on campus, $1,000 a year to
Right.
run, and our budget's around 60,000 a year.
So let's dive into that really quickly. How do you make up that difference
So
money wise?
the kids pay $250 a semester to play,
Okay.
and that generates about a third of our budget. We have some sponsors. You can see here, Gossett Motorsports.
Let's give
Thank
them a
you,
shout
Gossett
out.
Motorsports. Yep.
That's right. That's right.
And a couple of other sponsors that provides about a third of our funding, and then the alumni come in and provide the rest.
Did you find it difficult to get the sponsors?
Yeah, it is difficult to get the sponsors. They got
It's
to
n-
really do
it's
it
n- and
because they want to.
it's right.
You know,
It's not a marquee sport like basketball or football or even soccer.
right. And because we've been so successful, we're one of the few teams in the country that's been broadcast on national television and those kind of things.
Right.
But that's fairly new, and it's still not the kind of exposure that justifies the expense. They do it because they want to do it, because they
Right.
want to help the sport, and or they have a personal connection to somebody that's on the team or played on the team or something like that. So yeah, we can't get the FedExes and that kind of money. Um, so we get by financially.
What do you think it would take to get a bigger sponsor like that?
They look at it strictly as ROI. So if I can't show them that this brand is going to
Sure.
be in front of X 100,000 of views,
Right.
they're not going to put the money in. They just won't do it. And that's 95%. And that's especially all the big companies.
Sure. Sure.
Gossett's a local, they're big, but they're local.
Right.
So they're more amenable to it. But the big, international corporations and big national corporations, it's they get so many requests. It is strictly ROI. Well, guess who just showed up?
We got a special guest, and
A
this is
special
your
guest.
granddaughter.
Yeah, this is Lucy, and my wife Heather must have come home for lunch
Yeah, I
and
did.
heard the baby crying.
Yeah.
You want to be
So-
on the show?
No, I don't want to be.
I mean, she is on the show.
So we have to thank Lucy because Lucy is the reason that you're back in Memphis
That's correct. She is.
and led to the path of you being our head coach at the University of Memphis. So
That's true.
hi, Miss Lucy.
Say hi. Yeah. You see yourself on there? Who's that? Who do you see? Who is that? She ain't talking. She's
That's
talking
okay. That's okay.
nonstop, but she ain't talking now. I'm
Come on,
That's-
Lucy.
glad you're here. You can corral her for a little stay for a bit. Okay.
Okay, leave the mouse.
I think she needs a diaper too.
Well, that's not my topic.
Yeah.
So this is the real life of our head coach for the University of Memphis rugby team.
Yeah.
But as we said, she's the reason that you came back to Memphis. So
Uh-huh.
you retired from the Navy in what, 2014? Was that what
Yeah,
you said?
2014. Yeah.
And so then, which all of you out there, I love this. In 2014, you retired and you decided to leave the country.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we in 2014 I retired, and 2 years later we were living in Tipton County and I was coaching that high school team,
Right?
and my wife was an attorney and practicing family law in a rural county.
Yes.
So there's not a lot of work except for family law. And she was, it's divorce and child custody and those kind of things. And she just was unhappy. And so we're talking about it one Friday, and sitting out on the deck. And I said, hey, if you're that unhappy, we don't have to do this. And we decided that right then we were going to pack up, and initially we were going to move to Belize, but we went to Belize to check it out and didn't really like it. And so then we just said, okay, we're going to Costa Rica. We sold everything we owned. We went to Costa Rica with 2 suitcases and 2 dogs, and went on our journey overseas. So we did that for 3 years.
So what was the excitement in Costa Rica? What was it like to live there? I can only imagine visiting, but what was it like to really get into the community and really become a part of it?
It was really interesting. We lived in Playas del Coco, which is on the west coast, on the north side, near Nicaragua. And Playas del Coco is a tourist town, a beach town, but
Right.
there are a lot of expats there, a lot of Americans and a lot of Canadians that have retired there. Um, most of our friends were about 10 or 15 years older than us
Right.
when we got down there, but there were some younger people there as well, just a different kind of group. So, we got into that community of people, and we would, they'd have parties and play golf and go fishing and go island hopping and sailing. And it was just like being on vacation,
Every
every
day.
day of your life. Uh-huh.
Did you get tired of that?
I did. For me, I don't play golf and I don't
Right.
fish. So, but my wife loved it. She's a beach girl. She
Right.
loved it. She had her girlfriends and going to the beach and going sailing and doing all those things. But our plan before we ever went was we were going to stay there for about 3 years, and then we were going to move to Asia for like 3 years, and then maybe Europe, and just bounce around the world,
Right.
for the rest of our time, because we really weren't expecting what eventually happened, which was Lucy.
Right.
And so we did the time in Costa Rica, and then we moved to Malaysia. We were living in Kuala Lumpur when our daughter Ashley told us she was going to get married, and they wanted to start having kids. So that's what brought us back to Memphis.
Now you did coach when you were in Kuala Lumpur.
I did.
And what was that like? Was that just because you needed something to do? And what was that like coaching for a
Yeah,
Malaysian team?
I got there, and rugby is pretty big over there in that part of the world,
Right.
and there are a few clubs, and I looked online and contacted one through Facebook and say, hey, I'm here in Kuala Lumpur.
Mm-hmm.
I've coached rugby for 12 years. Do you guys need any help? And they're like, yeah. And the KL Cobras is the name of the team, and they have kids playing from age 6 all the way to 60.
Wow.
They have teams like, and that's the European model, where the club is like the rugby club is like a country club or like a tennis
Sure.
club or a golf.
Sure.
And so they have programs for every age, and it becomes your whole social life.
Yeah.
A restaurant and a bar and a clubhouse, and all the people. And so I went and met the guy that runs it, and he said, well, we could use, you have high school experience, we could use some help with our U14 boys team. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And I started coaching them, and I was coaching them as an assistant
Right.
when we decided to come back to Memphis.
Was there a language issue, a language barrier?
In Malaysia, yeah. The kids are pretty good with English.
Mhm.
In most places I've been in the world, but the parents,
Right.
were the ones that had the difficulty with the language. Um, it was a little bit of difficulty, but we made it work.
I did my student teaching in part in Germany and then in
Okay.
England, but in Germany, I found the same thing. It was 10 years after the wall had come down. The
Mhm.
kids were required to learn English, but the parents were not necessarily very good at all and not confident about speaking either. And
Mhm.
and then the kids had learned British English instead of American English, and so they just wanted to hear me talk like about
Uh-huh.
anything.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, and you figure out how to get your meaning across. If if they don't know all the words, you can kind of figure out how
Mhm.
to communicate. So you move back to Memphis because of Lucy,
Uh-huh.
and you get here. And how did you get involved with the Memphis inner city rugby?
Well, when I had been coaching high school, Memphis Inner City Rugby had started, and I was the conference director,
Oh,
high school and middle school rugby for this area.
right.
Um, and so when they got started, I got to know the guy who started it, or the three guys that started it, and I, had a good relationship with them. And so when I started telling people, "Hey, I'm coming back," he's like, "Oh, do you want to, come coach for us?" I was going to live in Memphis. He's like, "Come coach for us, come coach for us." And so I said, "Okay, I will." And so I got back and started coaching for them, and I coached with them for a couple of years. Um, on and off. Basically, I wasn't coaching a particular team. I was more going around coaching the coaches. They had a lot of
Oh,
young
okay. Yeah.
coaches. And
Right.
so I was kind of doing that, and I joined their board of directors and became more involved in the running of the organization and the things that a board of directors does. And then when Lucy was born and I was going to be taking care of her while her parents are at work, I couldn't go to high school and middle school practices because they were right after school, and
Sure.
her parents didn't get home until 5:36.
Right.
So I had a couple of my former teammates were coaching at Memphis. And I was like, I'd love to go coach with those guys. They're my, friends and,
Right.
all that stuff. And so then I started coaching with the Tigers.
Um, what do you think kind of brought up that surge of rugby teams in the Memphis area? Was it, just a few people who love rugby and wanted to see it started and get kind of bolstered? Had
Uh-huh.
Memphis had a rugby team since you played in the late 80s?
Yeah, they had a team almost the whole time. There were a
Okay.
few years where the club had been removed by the university for conduct issues. So they
Okay.
were no longer a club for a few years, but then they got they got it back together and got that fixed. But yeah, it was, in fact, this fall will be our 40-year anniversary. So we started in 84, and this
Right.
fall we're going to have a big alumni thing and all that.
Oh, I'll
So
have to make sure that I come out for that.
yeah, that'd be great. I'll make sure
Um,
you have the information.
yeah, I would love to do that. So do you think, do you see rugby slowing down at all?
No, it gets bigger and bigger. I mean, there was a big hit during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, as there is with all the
Yes.
stuff. But we have about 500 or 600 kids in the Memphis area playing rugby through
Wow.
MICR. Christian Brothers High School has a team. White Station High School has a team. There's a team out east based around Collierville, Germantown,
Right.
One Rugby that's
Right.
won several state championships. And those programs are all just getting bigger. Every year they get bigger and bigger, and the Tigers team gets bigger and bigger every year. Just maybe 6 or 7 years ago, the Tigers had 15 players on their team,
Right.
and now we have 60.
Oh my gosh.
And so it just keeps growing and growing and growing, and it's growing everywhere in America. So we're starting to get players from out of state and international players coming here to play, and so it just keeps going.
What lures a player, I hate to use the word lure, what interests a player from another city in the United States or overseas to come to Memphis? Because they're not getting scholarships.
Right. There are no scholarships. So the few international players that we've had um, have been here already for
Okay.
school. So the last two that we had, the one graduated this past December and the other the year before, were grad students who had come to Memphis for grad school and had
Right.
played rugby, one in Ireland and one in Canada, and just happened to, be here and wanted to play rugby.
Sure.
Uh, we are working on recruiting international students. The problem is the university, um, they're financially they're not supporting it,
Sure.
to happen. Right across an hour from here at Arkansas State University, their administration allows them to have an unlimited number of waivers for international students to pay in-state tuition if they play rugby.
Interesting.
So, when the kid's looking at these options, he's like, I could be in Memphis or I could be at Arkansas
Right.
State. Well, at Arkansas State, it costs half as much,
Right.
right?
What's the incentive for Arkansas State or any school? What's that incentive to provide those waivers to international students?
Well, when you look at it, when you break down the math, even if they're paying the in-state rate, the school still makes money,
Sure.
right? That was one thing. And they just had at Arkansas State, there was a guy out there that started their program in the 80s,
Mm-hmm.
and he just talked the university into it, and it just built and built. And what the university gets, besides more students, is they get the prestige.
Right.
Arkansas State is a D1 premier team that, they're one of the top five teams in the country every year at the highest level,
Right.
and that's what they get for it.
And Memphis is a D2. Is that what you?
Yeah, we're D2. If you have less than 10,000 male full-time students undergrad, then you're D2. If you have more than 10,000, then you're D1 AA.
Interesting. I would
And
have
you
thought
can,
like,
now you can play up, like Arkansas State plays up, right? But you can't
okay,
play down. And
okay,
we could play up. We're good enough to play up, and we would probably be, we're a top nationally ranked D2 team. We'd probably be in the top quarter of D1
hmm,
AA teams. But the problem with that is they're more spread out, and your travel expenses get
right,
huge
right.
because you can't just go for the day, play, and come back. Now every trip is hotels and transportation and food, and we just don't have the money. If we had the money, I'd do it tomorrow. I'd move
So
us up to
who
D1.
are some of the schools that you play then in your schedule?
We are in the rugby version of the SEC. So we play Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Auburn, um, also in the D1 side, there's a part of it. There's Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia. We play all these teams. So
Right.
it's basically SEC with a few others
Sure.
mixed in.
How do you travel to those places?
The ones that we, if they're less than 3 or 4 hours, we leave in the morning in vans. We rent
Right.
vans, we drive down, we play, we come home. If it's further, like Auburn is about 5.5 hours,
Sure.
we leave on Friday, we take vans, spend the night, play, come back late on Saturday night.
Okay. But that's still, I mean, that's a hard, um,
It's
that's hard on student athletes because they're
it is.
still going to school.
It is. Like we've got our A team is going this coming weekend to Knoxville for the conference championship for sevens. And
Okay.
our B team is going to New Orleans for an invitational tournament at a Major League Rugby stadium as a curtain opener. And so it's a 6 hour drive. So we're leaving at about noon on Friday, right?
Right.
Get there in the evening, check in the hotel, go to dinner, come back to the hotel, get up at 7:38 in the morning, have breakfast, go to the field, play all day, get in the van after playing, no showers, no nothing, get in the
Wow.
van, drive home, get home at midnight, and the kids get home and go do their thing, and then I come home, and I get
Right.
home at midnight too.
And that's, not to say that rugby is any easier or harder than other sports, but there's a physicality to that. And so you're out there, you've had to ride in a vehicle for several hours, and then you're having to get out there and have that physical contact. And I'm guessing you don't have time to like soak people in ice and all that kind of stuff. And they're getting right back on a van and having to ride without moving very much
Right,
for several more hours. That
right.
has to be hard on all of them. They have to love the sport so much to put up with that.
Yeah, it's a sport you have to want to play.
Sure, because you don't
And I
get paid.
tell kids
They
all the
don't.
time,
They don't get paid for it. They don't get a scholarship. There's no NIL for them, is there?
no, there's
No.
nothing. They actually have to pay, like I said,
Right.
250 a semester to be on the team.
So it's truly the love of the sport in
Absolutely.
in all of its basics. It's just the love of the sport. How do you feel when you're out there coaching and you see your teams doing well? How does that make you feel?
It is just so exciting to see the kids, take the things that they learn and put them into practice and do it well. I just, I get so excited for game day and to
Sure.
just see the kids play, and so excited to watch film after the game and see it all again, and see how they're doing. I don't know how to describe it, but it's a really big high to see it.
I've heard so many people that got into coaching, a lot of them, all former athletes, they talked about how in some strange way they love coaching more than they loved playing because it just gives them a different sense of accomplishment and pleasure and all those kind of things. You know, Lucy, I think, interrupted us when we were talking about your stint as the high school coach, and I wanted to make sure everybody understood you were extremely successful in Tipton County. You
Yeah,
had,
we
I
were.
think, 18 conference championships and two state titles.
Mhm.
I mean, that's very impressive. And I would hope that, you know, I hope everybody sees the value in, even if it's not a marquee sport. I hope that everybody can see some value in kids doing something that they love and teaching them about family and team and just how to put your whole effort into something.
Yeah, the high school, the parents were uh very supportive. It cost them a lot of money, and they would travel
Sure.
to games, and we would go to St. Louis and Knoxville and Nashville and New Orleans and all these places and spend, it cost a lot of money and time and all that stuff. But the parents just absolutely loved it. Just absolutely loved it. And I would tell them at these parents meetings is that, what I can promise you is 2 nights a week after practice, I'll send them home exhausted. I promise you that. And they just love that. They just thought that was the greatest thing, that we would just wear them out.
So can people donate to the team?
Yeah, absolutely. We have our website is www.tigerrugby.org.
Okay.
And there's a place there where people can help support what we do and support us or sponsor one of the players or that kind of thing. And also Memphis Intercity Rugby .org is where you could go and help that organization as well.
I'll put all of that stuff in the show notes so everybody, I'll make sure that that is listed pretty special there so everybody can see it, and hopefully we can get you guys some more money. So let's talk about, before we started the interview, we were just kind of chatting, and I talked about how I've seen for you the military and sports kind of just interlaced each other throughout your life, and you've in the beginnings, sports was kind of like the side thing, and military was plan A, and then you retire and sports becomes the plan A then, which is not necessarily the case for a lot of athletes. And I just love how it's just intertwined and kept you moving on. Do you see yourself slowing down anytime soon?
My wife and I have talked about it. When she has a job now, but and I'm 60 and she's 58, and when she's ready to retire, I'll probably retire as well. So I'm constantly, working with assistant coaches and bringing them on,
Sure.
trying to train them up and teach them to be my replacement, and that kind of thing, because there's no money in it. You can't
Right.
do it for the money. You got to do it for the passion. So finding someone who wants to do it and has the ability to do it is very difficult. The financial ability,
Right.
because
Right.
it's like a hobby, right?
Right.
It's like
Because you're
it's like
you're not getting paid to do this.
no, the coaches don't get paid. Now there are some universities where they get some money, but not a whole lot. It's not a career,
Right.
except in a very few places. Then, so it is possible for people to make a living as a coach for rugby, and there are more and more of those coming along as the sport grows. But until the universities are willing to foot that bill, there's no way we can raise that kind of money or put that kind of burden on the students to pay, a full-time
Right.
coaching staff. That would be, $250,000, $500,000 a year,
Sure.
full paid staff with,
Sure.
employee benefits and all that kind of stuff.
S-
So until the universities get behind it, it's just not going to happen.
So currently, you guys are currently playing, right?
Yeah,
And when does the season does the season end, or do you play all year?
we're in the sevens season now, which is the
Okay.
Olympic version of rugby. And our
Okay.
conference championship is this coming weekend. And then in 3 weeks is the national championships in Maryland.
Okay.
So that's an example, that trip to Maryland with just 12 players and 2 coaches will cost us about $15,000.
And that will be, hopefully, I'll try to make sure that this interview airs before
Okay.
that, to kind of give you guys a little exposure. But can people come out and watch your games now currently? Or
Yeah, we play on campus.
Okay.
You remember Memorial Field where the track
Yes.
next to
Yes. You
the
still
rugby?
play there?
That's currently the rugby field. And we play there, and it's free. You can just walk up and see a game.
Okay.
We don't have anything left at home, except practices
Right.
the rest of the
Right.
season. But come fall, we'll have probably 5 home games.
Okay.
People can come out and watch it. We usually have 300 or 400 spectators at our games.
Do they have any place to sit? I haven't been over there lately.
We have aluminum bleachers
Okay.
that are down next to El Marone, and we pull those up and put them on the track for the
Oh,
game.
okay. Okay.
But a lot of people just bring their chairs,
Sure, yeah.
folding sports chairs, and just sit on the side, on the track and watch the game.
So as we wind this down, I want to so let me ask you this. So, and I'm not saying you're leaving anytime soon, but when you decide to retire from coaching, what will you do then?
Well, the plan is when Lucy gets a little bit older and she's in
Mhm.
school and my wife's ready to retire and I'm ready to move on, then we'll go back to we're going to keep the house, but we'll be gone most of the time traveling.
Just travel.
Yeah.
Where's a place you would love to go that you haven't been yet?
I would love to go to India.
Okay.
I've been to Sri Lanka, but I've not been to India. I would love to go to India. I'd love to go to some places in the Middle East, but
Yeah.
it's a little touchy over there at the
It
moment.
is it is
Little
touchy.
risky. Yeah. Um, so there, I've been to several countries in South America, but I love going to South America too.
Mhm.
I particularly want to go to Argentina, Australia, New Zealand,
Sure.
for the rugby. And basically, she's a huge rugby fan too, and so we want to travel around and kind of follow the big rugby events and
Sure.
tournaments around the world,
Yeah.
go to games and see cities and sightsee and that kind of thing.
Um So as we kind of wind down, what do you think your biggest value is now to others?
As a coach, for me, it's all about developing young men. Uh,
Mhm.
the game, the wins will come. If you recruit and retain good players, and by good, I don't mean good at rugby. I mean just good kids that
Right.
want to work hard and learn. We can teach rugby to anybody and we can be successful. But really, what we focus on at Memphis and what I've always focused on as a coach is developing young people into good young adults. And
Right.
and if we can accomplish that goal, which I think we do, then that's what's satisfying for me and that's what keeps me doing it.
And we had talked about prior to the show, rugby, you can actually go pro in rugby now.
Yes.
And that came about in when, like I think you said 4
It
years ago?
internationally it became professionalized in the early 2000s.
Okay.
Before then it was all amateur. So the
Right.
club, the big teams and clubs started paying players and getting
Right.
money and the TV deals and all that kind of stuff. And overseas now players can make, a million, 2 million, 3 million a year playing rugby. In the US, just about 4 years ago, Major League Rugby started, and
Okay.
there are 10 teams in the US, and they pay players not at the level that they're paid overseas,
Sure.
but you can make a living playing rugby right now in America if you can get on one of these teams.
So do you see players starting to come to Memphis with that dream or that hope of playing pro rugby?
They all have that
They
dream.
all have that dream.
Yeah, it's like every athlete. If you're playing a sport you love,
Sure.
you'd like to do it for the rest of your life. And
Right.
to do that, you have to have some kind of financial way to do it. And so, um, they all, and of course, at that age, they're all indestructible. In their minds, they're going to play forever,
That's
and
right.
you
That's
know,
right.
they're going to do this and they're going to do that. And so, yeah, they all have those dreams. And we do have a few players that have that kind of potential
Mhm.
coming through the program all the time. And so we support that, and we get them in front of the people they need to be in front of, and onto the all-star teams they need to be on, and those kind of things, so that they can pursue that.
Okay. Last question. What would you tell a 9-year-old Dave?
Um, about me, or about my life, or about
Just like what advice would you give to a 9-year-old, like your 9-year-old self? If you could go back and give your 9-year-old self advice, what would you give them?
I
Give him.
would tell them work less and play more. I don't think anybody looks back on their life and says, I wish I had worked more.
No, I don't think they
So
do.
that's what I tell them. Work less, play more. Don't worry about it. All the other.
Um, that's right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. I can't wait to see how you guys do later this month, and I'll make sure that I give you a shout out when it gets closer to that
All
time
right.
for the national championships. Correct?
Yep. Yeah,
In
that's
Maryland.
yep, at the end of April.
That's right. So, as we wrap up, thank you all for listening and sharing our episodes. I love reading all your comments and show reviews. Please take a moment to like, share, and review our podcast on Apple. That helps the show get found by everyone else. I so appreciate each and every one of you for your support. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Fifth Quarter Podcast with today's guest, Coach Dave Hill from the University of Memphis Rugby. Until next time, remember, change is our ally and it paves the way for greatness. Stay inspired. Have a great rest of the week.